Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Top Chef QPOC Fest panel. My name is Jonny Garza Villa, and I will be kind of co-moderating this panel with Emery Lee.
I just
Just
needed to wash the egg yolk off of my hands.
as you know, whatever he's doing. Anyways, this is going to be a fun little chat about food and as it relates to QTBIPOC storytelling, why we love food and stuff like that. While a few of us are attempting to bake or cook something, added to that, we love chaos here. So, yeah, we'll be asking some questions and just kind of working at the same time. Um, cool. Besides that, don't be mean, and we're gonna get started. So the first question we have is, what are y'all preparing, or what sort of like what would you be preparing that kind of like relates to your book? We'll also just like shouting out your book. What's your book about? Is like how is food relevant in that book? All that sort of stuff. Alicia, would you like to start?
Oh, hold on. That was the air conditioner. It was like going to be super loud. Hi, I am Alechia Dow. I wrote a lot of books. I think, yeah, in 2 weeks, one of them comes out. A Song of Salvation. I would not say it's a very food-tastic book. I would say it's very space opera with a lot of emotions. But I do have another book coming out in October that is food fantasy. So I think I could make anything and it would be like really relevant to the story. Today I am making brownies and I made chocolate chunk cookies, brown butter chocolate chunk cookies, which are sitting on the counter now. Let's see. Ooh, yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to ALA very soon, so I'm taking all of this with me to hand out to people.
Oh, lovely.
So I'm going to be like, surprise, friends. I've never met you before, but here are some cookies. It's going to be great.
Like, if I wasn't already envious of the fact that, like, everyone's at ALA and I'm not, like, that would do it.
Right. Adiba, what kind of like food is like present in your story or your storytelling? What would you be bringing us today to the party?
So my book is The Do's and Donuts of Love, and I think it's pretty obvious what food is relevant to this book. It is in general like all baked goods, but mainly it is donuts because Sharon, who is the protagonist of the book, her parents run a donut shop, and her ex-girlfriend, her parents run like a rival donut shop. So there's like a lot of donuts in the book in general. So I'm not making anything today, but if I was, I would definitely be attempting to make some donuts.
Love that.
Donut.
Emery, what are you making?
What am I making? So I am making, it's a Japanese dessert called dorayaki. And it's basically a pancake with red bean paste in the middle. So I made the red bean paste earlier because this was my 3-hour project. This is called suben, and it's basically like just like red bean sugar, and it's like mushed up and it goes in the middle of pastries. But all of this is because my book is this one, Cafe con Leche, which is about two enemies whose parents own rival cafes who then have to work together to save their parents' shops. But Theo, who is the Japanese character, his parents own an Asian American bakery. And so dorayaki is actually one of the pastries that they sell at the shop, which is why I thought it would be cute to make it. And it was also one of the recipes that I featured in my little recipe zine like pre-order campaign. So I made it before. It just takes 5 hours.
Perfect. I'm making a drink first, but besides that, I am also making chilaquiles. Doing a like vegetarian version with some mushroom instead of like the usual like carne asada. But yeah, I write like really Mexican books, and this felt like it's one of my favorite breakfasts, and this felt pretty appropriate. So yeah, I am making chilaquiles verdes. Got some tomatillos and jalapenos and onion boiling. Yeah, super fun. Cute. And then I think we kind of like touched on this a little bit, but what role does food play in your story? And does it ever come across as like a cultural signifier and like any sort of like impactfulness in your storytelling? Whoever wants to jump in on that one.
I can go first. I couldn't tell if you were like, sorry. I was like, Alicia is trying to unmute or she's telling me to go, but yeah, I'll go. So yeah, food in general is kind of like the driving factor, I guess, in the Do's and Donuts of Love because it's set in a baking competition. And so like really everything in the story is like driven by baking and food in general. And yes, there's definitely like big like cultural aspects to the food. There's two I guess cultures in some way present. One of them is Irish culture, not specifically Irish cultural food, but in Dublin back in like 2015, 2016, we had this really weird donut craze, which sounds like I feel like if you were not here, you wouldn't understand like how random it was that this happened. But
we had one in California too.
Okay. So maybe like everybody had this donut craze at some point. But I remember like I would have people come to Dublin to visit me, and they'd be like, "Why are there like 3 donut shops on the same street? That doesn't make any sense." And I was like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but that's what's happening right now. So that's kind of what was the inspiration behind the book, just like this random donut craze that we had. But then obviously Shirin is Bangladeshi Irish, just like me. So Bangladeshi food kind of plays a big role in the things that she bakes. One of the first things that she does when she gets into the baking competition is she goes to find like a Bangladeshi cookbook that her mom gave her, and she's like looking through it, thinking of like the things that she can bake. And there's a lot of like Bangladeshi baked goods that she also makes during the show. One of the things that she makes, which I love, is something called bakor kani, which is, I don't know if you guys have had like paratha, but it's like a sweet kind of paratha, which you can get in the region of Bangladesh that I'm from, called Sylhet. So there's a part of the book where they're doing like bread week, like you have in the Great British Bake Off, and she decides to make bakor khani. So yeah, there's like a lot of cultural aspects of the book. A lot of Bangladeshi culture definitely comes into play.
I can jump in now.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say first, I love Adiba's work, and I love Do's and Donuts, and I love all of your books because you have a little element of food in each of them that it's just like so exciting for me to read. So I should say I'm also a former pastry chef. I am classically trained, and I have the 4-year degree and and it's all very exciting. I used to be a high-end pastry chef in like Bryant Park, New York, and I was kind of good. But it's so tiring. It's so tiring. Like you get up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and you do the baking part. And then that's until 11, and then you have a nap, and then at like 5 you start the pastry part, that can be like until 11 or midnight, and then you sleep briefly, and then you go do the next thing. And I did that for a few years, and I am not in physical shape for that. I'm like, first, I'm too old. Secondly, when I bend over to do like chocolate work now, my back really hurts. So like, I'm just not there anymore. I miss it. But I'm glad I get to write books now, and like I get to put food into that. So the cultural aspect, I would say, is the things that I grew up with, and I felt really is like comfort food for Just a Pinch of Magic, which is coming out in October. And one of them was the apple pie. It was like the first thing I learned to make. I grew up really, really poor. And like a few blocks over, there was this old woman who had an apple orchard in her backyard. You can't even make this up. It was just like, I thought it was like the secret garden. And I wanted to I went by and she was like, hey, you, can you help me pick these apples? And if you pick any of the apples, you can keep them. And it feels like this is a start to like a fable, but it's an actual thing that happened. And so I would like take home buckets of apples, and I was like 6 or 7. So I learned how to make apple pies. And so one of the things that I like brought into Just a Pinch of Magic is doing apple pies, and how much better I've gotten since I was 6 or 7, like 30 years later. I'm like amazing at it. But it was really about comfort food and the things that I grew up loving and experimenting with and like perfecting over years. And it takes me 10, 12 years to actually get a recipe perfect. So I take forever. I'm like the slowest at that, but that's what I'm bringing to it. And it's such a blast and such an honor to be able to do that.
Okay. I can answer now because I have to leave that bowl in the fridge for like 15 minutes. Okay, so yes, food in my book. It's hugely important, obviously, because the entire premise of the book is like these 2 kids trying to save their parents' cafes. But basically, like the whole premise, like it's called Cafe con Leche because it's a combination. They end up making like one kid is Puerto Rican and then the other kid is Asian American, and they end up making this like fusion, like little like operation that basically just involves like selling both of their cultural foods, but like together as a way to kind of like make like a gimmicky attempt at like selling to other people. But like in that whole process, they kind of learn like what like their cultural food and all that kind of stuff means for them personally. But then they also learn to be a little less precious about like the way that they approach like traditionalism when it comes to their food. And like for them, food is like a huge part of just like their inheritance, like with their like relationships with their families, because both of their parents are extremely I don't want to say conservative in terms of like politics, but in terms of like their culture. They feel like their culture should stay exactly as it's always been. They should do everything the way that their parents and their grandparents did it. And so for them, like food becomes this whole like representation of what their culture and their like family's history is. And so it's very much like this idea that like every recipe that you take from your family becomes like this living, breathing part of your culture. And if you don't respect that food, then you're not respecting that culture. And so for them, I think it's like a really, it's just like a really big part of their like growth to kind of accept that like their food can grow and change and they can share it with other people. And like through that process of sharing with other people, they're not like abandoning their roots. They're actually like expanding their roots and like growing. They're allowing their culture to grow with them. And like that's kind of where like a lot of like I think the beauty and like the romantic tension comes from, is them learning the joys of like opening up to each other like as they share that like food and stuff. So
I knew that when I got to the blender part of this, it was going to be my biggest rival. I'm battling with my blender right now. But yeah, I growing up like in like a small town in Southeast Texas, like I really was pretty like assimilated into like Americanness and like fully just kind of like not embracing my like Mexican heritage or like my brownness. But one thing that I did connect with always was the food and like my grandparents cooking and like the one good Mexican restaurant in the town that we would always have my birthdays at. And so like that kind of became a huge foundation of just getting comfortable writing like about my culture, starting with like food and like my character's relationship with food. And also just like I love like taquerias and I love like all this like I love Mexican food already. And so like it was super easy to just kind of like start from that perspective and then like lean into it into like, yeah, like I can write about my culture. I can write Spanish. I can write people being appreciative of all the other aspects of what it is to be me. But yeah, I think that's kind of like it's sort of the foundation I use to like just create my stories.
you know, you just made me think of, I don't know why, but you made me think of something because like I feel like grew up to a certain extent disconnected from my culture, but I feel like it was kind of inverse to yours in that my parents don't cook. So I did not grow up with like homemade food. I grew up with like cheap takeout. And so like learning to embrace food, like culture and my food kind of went hand in hand because I had to learn to make it myself. But I think it's funny because the one thing that my mom, since I moved out of the house, the one thing my mom does is she'll buy this box of like mochiko and she'll make like mochi, which like the most basic, like it's like a two item recipe like that she'll make in the microwave. Okay. But it's like the one thing I feel like we still kind of have like shared is like we're both using this. I mean, I'm making an actual recipe and she's microwaving some mochi. But like, you know, I feel like there's a connectivity here, you know, between family and like across distances. I think that's like very like symbolic to like a lot of what I write.
Yeah. And like Andre and Santi were here was my pandemic book. And so like a lot of it was like me missing going to like my favorite taqueria. Because like not only did it shut down, but it caught fire like a weekend before. Like everything shut down. So like I couldn't even order takeout from there. And so like fully just in my depression era. But just like the memories of like going with my friends there and like all the times that we've gone and just the feeling of being with friends out and having a communal meal together was just something that like really made me think about like community and all the ways in which I think like that ends up being present in Andre and Santi were here.
So question is, what inspired the I guess because we all have like multiple books, but as far as like the book that we're currently like discussing, what was the big inspiration for your book?
Okay, I think Alicia wants me to go first again.
I was telling you.
Okay. Sorry, I haven't gotten that good at reading your signals.
I'll just do this.
Okay. I feel like I already spoke about this a little. The main inspiration for the Do's and Donuts of Love was definitely like that random donut craze that we had. And I was discussing this with a friend like literally today, but there was a lot of shenanigans going on, to my knowledge, with the donut shops because there was a rumor that the daughter of one of the donut shop owners dated the son of one of the other ones and stole like their business plans, and then they opened like a donut shop. And yeah, so there were a lot of shenanigans going on. So you guys can see why that kind of inspired my book. But also at the same time, like all of you said, I also like grew up with food, and food is like one of the most important things in Bangladeshi culture. I feel like we never do anything without food being present. And so I think in general, like Alicia said, food is very present in like all of my books, but I actually don't even think about it. Like I never sit down and think, oh, I'm gonna write a scene where food is gonna be important. It's just so integrated into like my daily life. It's so integrated into my culture that it just comes very naturally. But then with this book, I was kind of like, I would actually like to write a book that is about food, that is like a foodie book that's kind of exploring a little bit deeper some things to do with food. So it was like a little bit more deliberate. And so just like food in general, but also the random donut stuff happening in Dublin was the inspiration behind this book.
I can go. I just showed like I like to. That's it. That's my brownie batter. It's about to go in. It only bakes for 25 minutes. Yeah, I have 2 books coming out. Remember, I have to remember, not any of you. A Song of Salvation is in like 2 weeks, and I really don't know what I was thinking. I would love to tell you that I had a lot of inspirations. I wanted to do a space opera. I really loved The Fifth Element and thought I could do a take on that. And I did, but it was really hard. And I had never done a space opera before, so I was nervous about how I was going to approach it. And it was probably the hardest, most difficult book I've ever written. And that's really cool. It was a big challenge, and I'm really glad I got through it. And there's like very little food in there. And if there's food in there, it's really spacey, what I think might be very interesting if you lived in space to eat. So I had a lot of fun with that. And I think in the last one I had Raisinets because I'm a huge fan of Raisinets. I eat them like that's my thing. I have to have those. But for Just a Pinch of Magic, which is in October, I really wanted to go right back to me as a kid and making food, having a blast making food, and the kind of magic that I think people they imprint in their food as they're making it. Like there's this thought process of like, you leave a flavor, your hands carry flavor, and every time you make something with it, you're giving that flavor to something else. And it's an act of love, and it's an act of care, and it is, I think, one of the best ways to connect to other people. But it's also this thing inside you that everybody eats, and you can relate to each other. And I think that's very magical, and that's why I went food fantasy with it. And food was the inspiration for Just a Pinch of Magic, and nothing really else. It was just the idea of me as a kid baking my heart out and having a blast.
Jonny, are you getting drunk? Don't get wasted.
No, of course not.
Yeah, I mean, so my book, what I love telling people the story of where I came up with the idea for Cafe con Leche, because it was a shitpost tweet. I was I had stopped at like Porto's. I live in California, and we have this Cuban bakery called Porto's, but I'm originally from Miami, and so when I eat Cuban pastries, I think of like growing up like in Miami, like going to school, like my school was like 75% Cuban, and so like that was like the food that I grew up with, and so I was eating like a pastelito, and I was just kind of like, oh, what if, like, I was like, when am I gonna write that like enemies to lovers, like Cuban bakery versus like a like boba tea shop or something? And everyone was like, oh my god, you gotta write it. And I was just like, I wasn't planning on it, but then I was like, okay, well, Twitter has spoken, so I have no choice. And so I ended up like writing it, but I ended up changing, of course, the characters. Instead of being a Cuban story, because I'm not Cuban, I wrote a Puerto Rican story. And then I also, instead of writing like a Taiwanese boba shop, I wrote a Chinese and Japanese boba shop, because again, I am not Taiwanese. Yes, Porto's representation. Yeah, so like but it was very much like taking like those, because for me, like eating those foods immediately sent me back home. So it was like, even though like I'm literally across the country and like I'm not around these things anymore, it was like a major blast into the past. And I feel like that moment of like the nostalgia and like all the feelings that I had eating that food made me think of like, what if I took those exact same emotions and then just actually put them into a book? And like, I really did not think that book was going to be published. It was supposed to be like 95% a joke. And then for whatever reason, Twitter was super into it. And then my publisher was super into it. And suddenly everyone was into it. And now it's published. So.
For Andre and Santi were here, I think like the biggest inspiration was pettiness over American Dirt existing. I think the idea of like writing a book that takes place in Taqueria was always like on my mind, but like what tropes would that include? What was the storyline behind that? Like really wasn't something that I had in my head until like maybe January 2020 when that happened. And I'm like, nope, like I want to write something for my community, by my community, and this is what it's going to be. And I think just a lot of what 2020 was inspired my book. Again, just missing like going out to places with my friends and family. And I think turning it into a story that is like a love story, but also one that is like a love story that's romantic, but also platonic and familial and about community and like about yourself. Like in that time, I was like still waiting for my debut book to come out and just like figuring out the sort of stories I want to tell, the sort of stories that make me happy to tell. And I think in that way, like Anders' story of just kind of like figuring out who they are as an artist and loving the art that they do was like a tie-in to what I was even experiencing in that moment. So yeah, I would say my inspiration was like 2020, just that in itself. Let's see what is art. Oh, cute. Do you have a favorite food or like a recipe that you've mentioned in a book?
I guess I'll go first. Yes, I mean it's difficult to choose, right? Because there's so much food out there. Like, how do you choose a favorite? I always put a lot of biryani into my books because I really like biryani. Um, and I guess like I also put like specific like Bangladeshi biryani sometimes into my books just because I like specificity and also I like Bangladeshi biryanis a lot. I think there's something to be said about going to like a restaurant and eating that food, but I feel like my favorite foods are the ones that I grew up with, like the biryani that my mom cooked or like the food that my grandmother cooked. So I think like I would say yeah, like biryani is really good.
I have a lot of recipes in Just a Pinch of Magic that I really love. I would say the one I use the most, besides the apple pie one, is I have my Should Be Famous hot chocolate recipe in there, and that's because I like live on hot chocolate for a few months of the year where it's just like that's the preferred drink of choice. So I use that one a lot, but I also have the Ooh Girl, You're in Trouble cookies, which I think everybody should have in their lives. That one's like the one you throw everything in really fast and you make cookies because you know you are in trouble and this is the only way out of it. And that's like the base for, hold on, I just took this off the cooling tray. These are my brown butter chocolate chunk cookies. They are very good. Like, I wish I could give all of you one. I can't even. I'm going to take all these with me, so I'm not going to even really eat any. But that's like the base for Ooh Girl, You're in Trouble cookies. Those are.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like, so I basically have two recipes in Cafe con Leche that I think stand out to me the most. One is this Puerto Rican bread pudding that I think for me, like that's like the most vivid recipe from my childhood. Because like I said, my parents didn't cook, but my grandmother and my great grandmother used to bake. And so I had my mom give me like their handwritten recipe cards, and I could barely read them because their handwriting was awful. I had to like try to like decipher them in code and then figure out how to like make the recipe work. So like that one, like I love. And then the other one is, so like the book spoiler is called Cafe con Leche because the two characters come up with this like hybrid drink that mixes like the Puerto Rican like Cafe con Leche with like the like lychee jellies of like the boba drinks. And they call it Cafe con Leche. And so I made it because everyone was like, that sounds disgusting. There's no way that's edible. Like, what? How horrifying. And I was like, no, fuck you. You know what? Like, listen. I'm like, if boba shops can do like all these like coffee milk teas and like all this types of stuff, and they're good, and they can also have like lychee jellies as like a like topping, and those are good. I was like, I can make this work, and so I insisted on making it work, and it worked. So Cafe con Leche is a real drink. I have an actual recipe for it, and it's not disgusting. So yeah.
I think for me, like I love kind of like the food that happens in my first book, 1500 Miles from the Sun, where Jules, the main character, is very much like a cook. And like me, like fully enjoys spicy food. We're both very much hot Cheeto girls. And I think like there's this one where he just like makes like a quesadilla, but it's just like cheese and like a whole bunch of peppers. And I'm like, yes, like ideal. I want that. Like just quesadilla, too much cheese, and like one too many serrano peppers, and like that's what I want. So yeah, I think like anything that like he makes in there is very appealing to me. Let's see.
Okay, this one's a fun question. Do you prefer to cook for others or have others cook for you? And how would your main character feel if asked the same question? I think this is especially interesting because we're all like, yeah, like we love like the love in like food and like, oh, like sharing it with your friends and your family. So do you like to do the cooking or do you want other people to cook for you?
I'm not gonna wait for Alicia to point to me this time. I already know. I definitely prefer when other people cook for me, just because I feel like as much as I can enjoy cooking. I don't always enjoy cooking. I prefer baking to cooking. Um, and yeah, I'm a very impatient person, I think, and cooking takes patience. So I'm not good at it for that reason. So I definitely prefer when other people cook, especially because my mom is a really good cook and my grandmother was a really good cook. And again, like I grew up, eating their food. So I would rather I know that they can cook better than I ever could probably because they've had so much experience in their life. Um, and Shirin definitely likes to cook for other people. Like that's like her whole thing in the book. One of her favorite things to do is when she's like preparing for the show, her best friend Fatima is like across the ocean in Bangladesh for the summer, and so she bakes things and then she freezes them and she's like on the phone to her friend. She's like, yeah, I've like frozen the stuff that I practiced that when you come back you can eat it. So she definitely like loves to cook for other people. I think it's kind of like her love language, like cooking for other people or baking for other people, and baking the things that they love, not just what she loves.
I kind of want Adiba to invite me over to her family's house. Since I lived in Germany and I will be moving back there next year, I feel like that could be, we got to work this out somehow.
You can come, my mom will cook for you.
Please, please, I really want this so bad. So here's a very quick little story. When I went to pastry school, my mom said, you will never go to pastry school, you'll do culinary. So I went the first week and then I switched over to pastry, but I pretended to be in culinary school for 2 years. And then I took extra classes and all these other skill things so that I could learn culinary arts just to fool her. And so I got good at it. It's not like my passion baking is, but I'm okay. And I can do some things. Like it takes me a while, but I get there. It's a different process because pastry is very science and culinary is very art. So in baking, you can't just throw something in there and be like, oh, that'll work. You have to actually think everything through. And I love that process, but cooking is like the Wild West. So would my characters cook for other people? In A Song of Salvation, I think the main character, Zara, would probably love to cook for other people if she ever learned how to do that. And Wesley would rather somebody do it for him. And Ruben would like to be the person who's just always around eating. It's an absolute blast. And yeah, I think they would have a lot of fun with that.
Okay, but now I need like this book about someone pretending to go to culinary school, but is actually in like baking school instead. That's a book. I think like for my stories, like team like cook for you is definitely like Jules and I think like Santi. And then I think like team cook for me is for sure like Matt and Ander. And then like Andre is very much someone who will cook with you, but like not going like they have a whole family who cooks. It's like, why are you gonna do it when someone else does it better? Which I think is like the prevalent sort of thought here. And I think even for me too, like if like one of my friends or a family member makes something really good, I'm not gonna like take that away from them. I think that's mean. And like I can enjoy that. And if it's something that like I think I do well and I kind of like I want some validation, I'll do it. And then like here's my symbol that I love you and tell me how much you enjoy it. But yeah, like I think if it was something that I really enjoy making, then for sure I would prefer cooking it. Otherwise, no, they can take that.
Yeah, I think what you said for like Ander is exactly what I would say for Theo. Like I feel like he's like he could cook if he needed to, but like he definitely would prefer to just let someone else do it. Gabby, on the other hand, is like very much like he likes cooking because that's where he gets into like his happy place and he kind of gets in the zone and he can like, because he can overthink everything and like be like, but like annoying in his own head instead of like externally. And then like for like Noah, obviously Noah would never cook a day in his life, and that's why he's literally like, okay, cool, Devin, do everything because I would never in my life. But like Noah's the type of kid where like he would be like, man, you don't think I can cook? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna make something great. And then he burns the house down, and everyone's like, this is why we just don't want you to cook it. Just don't even try. Like, don't challenge him. It's not worth the energy. Personally, I also would much rather have someone cook for me than cook myself, because there's a 98% chance that I will fuck it up. But that said, I do occasionally like to, like, whenever I do like hosting for something, like then I will go all out. Like I did like this like anti-Valentine's Day party where it was just like all of my single friends getting together to like, you know, be like, whatever, who cares if we're not single? And I made like all of these like mini cheesecakes, and I wrote like really dramatic like messages on them that were just like really like, you know, self-deprecating and stuff. But I feel like for that kind of stuff that I'm down, because at that point it's like a whole like event and I'm just doing it for the chaos of it all. But in terms of like actually feeding someone, do not trust me. I'm a danger to us all.
Cute. Oh, this is a fun question. Okay, so all of our main characters are throwing a potluck dinner party. What are they bringing?
I've said donuts so many times during this panel, but I still have to say donuts because that's what Sharon would bring.
We need dessert. So.
Yeah, we do need dessert, yes. And all the donuts would have punny names, so it would be great.
I think for A Song of Salvation, the characters would probably bring, like Zara would probably bring a cake that somehow has the secrets of the universe within it, and it's like, it's made of stardust, and once you ingest it, you'll know everything about the universe. Enjoy. Like that would be who she is. She thinks that's great.
Iconic.
For Cavicle and Lychee, I think Theo would probably bring like an assortment of like everything from his like parents' shop, because he would probably just like tell his mom that he was going to a potluck, and she would be like, oh, take some of these, oh, take some of this, oh, you know what, you should take some of these too. And then it would just be like a whole like bucket load of like whatever his mom like shoved on him as like a, you know, take these to your friends, they'll like them. So that would probably be Theo. And then I think Gabby would probably bring he would probably bring something really sweet, because I feel like that's like, he's generally like good with like the baking and stuff. So probably some sort of pastry. The only thing is, I feel like now our potluck is like dessert. Like it's just a dessert buffet. Like, Johnny, bring something savory, please.
I mean, I think that like Santi would for sure probably bring like carne asada. Andre would bring the tortillas, and they would like be like, yeah, that's one cohesive thought. And like only salsa verde. There would be no other options. Yeah, they'd bring tacos for sure. Or gorditas. Actually, maybe gorditas.
They saved us all.
Yeah, we have gorditas for dinner and then so much desserts. And I think that's perfect. I think that's perfect. And then we've got one more cute question. And then if there's any questions in the audience, feel free to post them. We've got a few minutes left, so we can definitely answer one or two questions from y'all. So thinking tropes, themes, imagery, all of that. What are your go-to ingredients that make up the stories that you tell?
I'll go first to save Adiba from having to go first every single question. The main ingredient in all of my stories is hatred. The characters should hate each other at the beginning, and if they don't, why am I telling the story? I think the other things would probably be found family, gay, and artsy. I noticed that all of my characters are now becoming artists, so some sort of like artsiness. All of that mixed together with like a heavy serving of like romance, and then like a small sprinkling of like family problems.
I feel like my recipe is similar to Emery's, because I've also realized that all my books kind of have like a rival competitor energy to it. So definitely like some rivalry, some competitiveness there. And then I think a lot of queerness, a lot of Bangladeshi culture, again, a heavy dose of romance, also a heavy dose of like complex familial dynamics, um, just like a sprinkling of adorableness, I think.
So I would say heart, humor, and hope. That's been like the trifecta of every book I've written. I would love to say that I don't think it's always cheesy. I think it's very heartfelt, and I appreciate that because when you're writing marginalized characters in any kind of space, in any kind of genre, there's always this chance that that people are expecting you to bring all of this baggage with you that they want to see, and there's part of you that is like, yeah, those books are very important, but sometimes I just want to lean right into the joy of it, and what that means and what it would be like to be Black in space, and I want to look at that, and I think that's a lot of heart, and I love to look at that with humor. And whenever I write YA and any kid lit books, it's always about hope, because I think we need that the most, especially marginalized queer kids need hope the most. So I hope that that's what they take from it.
That's such a good answer. Oh my gosh. I think for me, I for sure humor, a little bit of trauma, and like gays fully simping for each other. And I think just like love and like every sort of way in which it is are kind of like what is always present. And like if you're cooking to like Selena in the background, like I think kind of completes that. Cute. I love those. We do have, let's see, a couple of questions. What's your favorite trope that you haven't gotten a chance to write yet?
I can go. I think with The Sound of Stars, it seemed like it was enemies to lovers, but it wasn't really. It was like strangers to lovers. But now I am writing All's Fairy in Love and War, which comes out in 2025. And it is basically a YA fairy god person like Whitney Houston Cinderella, but like make it teen and make it actual enemies to lovers. And I've been waiting for years to do this. And now I finally got to do that. And also I never got to write a character that had bipolar disorder. So I was really, really, really happy to be able to do that too. It was like finally getting a chance to do these. There are still some that I haven't gotten to yet, but I'm getting there. Like there's only one bed, which is one of my favorites. Like, I don't know. I have to find some more that I can finally get to.
I feel like I've written a lot of my favorite tropes already. My next book, which is the one I'm writing with my friend Farida Abike Amide, is like childhood friends to enemies, to friends to lovers, which I'm really excited about as well. And then the one after that, which is my next solo YA, is like kind of academic rivals to lovers. So I'm also really excited about that. I guess one that I would love to write is like a close proximity romance, because I think those can be like really fun and tense. I don't know a scenario where I would write it, and I don't have an idea, but that's definitely a trope that I love. So we'll see, maybe someday.
So like this is hard for me too, because I've written like 20 something books. So I think I've written all of my favorite tropes to some extent. But I think my favorite trope that I haven't released yet is in like a current project that I'm working on, which is just a second chance romance. I love second chance romance, and I'm quickly learning that most people I know hate it. And so I'm so excited to ruin them when they have to read mine and they actually like it. I think that is going to single-handedly be the greatest moment of my life. But so that obviously is a big one for me. I think the other one that I really like, but I've only done in like short fiction is like a whole like catastrophic story that takes place in like 24 hours. I would love to write like a novel like that, but like I also don't have any actual ideas. It's just kind of like that would be cute.
Emery stole mine. I was gonna say second chance romance. I think that'd be a lot of fun to write. Like that just yeah, for sure. Let's see. Ooh, oh my gosh. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. If someone asked you to come up with a food or a food name that would exist in your book's universe, what would it be? Like how for some parties they have a food item or drink relating to their book to serve their guests at like the party. I think Alicia like already had like a couple of good examples of those like cookies and stuff. So probably something like that.
I feel like I also have a couple of these in the Do's and Donuts of Love, just because one of the things that Sharon does is she names all the donuts in her parents' donut shop. So she comes up with punny names for all of them. So she has like the Robert Brownie Jr. donut, and then the Drew Blue Barrymore donut. So yeah, like those, I think. She has a lot of really fun punny names for a lot of her foods, and I had a lot of fun coming up with that. But I think those two.
Yeah, my book also already has like cafe con leche is like the whole like title of the book. But one that a friend came up with that I thought would be cute was we were talking about like how cool would it be if there were just like teas based off like all of like my books, and obviously like cafe con leche like would already like be able to be its own thing. But they were like, what meet cute chairy, ha ha ha. So like that's what I'm gonna go with.
I don't know. I feel like something like better than Taco Bell Mexican pizza or something. I don't know. Something really stupid for sure. But yeah, I'm so bad at that. I'm not clever. But yeah, I think this about gets towards the end of the panel. If y'all want to go around, let everyone know where they can find you, what projects you have coming up, and I will drop a link to the QPOC Fest bookshop page where y'all can buy all of our books, not only the ones here now, but just everyone who participated today. And yeah, go support QTBIPOC Stories.
Oh, you want us to talk about
find out yourself? Yeah.
Okay. My website is AleciaDow.com, which is ALECHIADOW.com. You can find me on Instagram at Alechia Dow, same spelling, and Alechia Dow on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, but I'm not good at the TikTok, I have to say. I feel like this is hard to like, it's hard for me to get on camera because I am not prepared. I do not look like a normal person for like most of the day. So it's hard for me, but you can find me on there. It's also Alechia Dow. Yeah, I have 2 books coming out this year. A Song of Salvation, which is a conclusion to The Sound of Stars and the Kindred. And that's YA sci-fi fantasy. And Just a Pinch of Magic, which is middle grade contemporary fantasy. And I have like more books coming that are all like, I have a murder at a cookie competition with Tracy Badua, and that's middle grade, and that was really, really fun to write. Did not know I was going to do a whodunit. Had a blast. So I have a lot of stuff coming out. Thank you. Oh, also, I just finished the brownies. I'm going to show you. But
yeah. Show us the end result.
Okay, I'll go while Alicia is bringing her brownies. Oh, okay. Those are our brownies.
Those are perfect.
So you can find me at adibajaigirdar.com. My Twitter is at adiba_j, and then my Instagram and TikTok are at dibs, DIBS_j. My new book, The Do's and Donuts of Love, just came out like a couple weeks ago. So you can go out and buy it now. That would be great if you did. And then my next book is the one that I am writing with my friend and fellow author, Frida Abike-Imide. It's called Four Eats and a Funeral. I believe it's out summer 2024. Yeah, those are all the projects I can currently talk about.
I'm Emery Lee. You can find me at emeryleebooks.com. I am also on Instagram at Emery Lee Books, and I am on Twitter and TikTok at Emery Lee Who. As far as current projects go, I am working on interactive fiction on storyloom.com, and I am releasing a webcomic later this year. As far as print books go, the Cafe con Leche paperback releases next month. And the Transmogrify anthology of trans magic short stories released last month. I am also in that. And those are the only projects that I can talk about.
And I'm Jonny Garza Villa. Look, the chilaquiles. Oh my God, they actually came out, I think, pretty good. Did that while doing all this. I'm proud of myself. I am at Jonny Escribe, like write in Spanish, on Twitter and on TikTok. I'm at Jonny Instas on Instagram. And I have a book coming out next April called Canto Contigo, which is another YA contemporary with a little dash of magical realism that is half grief book and half rivals to lovers story that I describe as the epic highs and lows of high school mariachi. And yeah, so with that, we will close out. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And if you were here all day, thank you so much for that. Thank you all for coming and being a part of the very first QPOC Fest. And follow QPOC Fest on socials to keep up with what's happening next. And yeah, have a great rest of your day. Bye.